Hello! So last time, when I was covering the entire history of Rome, I made you all a promise. I said, and I quote myself here because I respect my own work, the Eastern Roman Byzantines survived for a whopping 1,000 additional years, and I'll make a Byzantine Empire video one day to explain it in more detail. Well, today is that day. You're welcome, and also, sorry, this one's a bit long too. Historically, Facts, Part 27. Here's the thing everyone gets wrong about Rome. You probably think it fell in 476 AD. Some guy named Romulus got politely asked to retire, and that was that. Curtains. End credits. Rome. Deceased. Wrong. Well, half wrong. Because while the western half of the Roman Empire was busy getting dismantled by guys with cool facial hair and even cooler swords, the eastern half was sitting there completely fine. Thank you very much, and would continue being completely fine for another 1,000 years. That's longer than the gap between us and the actual fall of Rome. Let that sink in for a second. We call this eastern chunk the Byzantine Empire today. They did not. If you'd walked up to any of these guys and called them Byzantine, they would have looked at you like you just insulted their mother, because as far as they were concerned, they were simply Romans, the real ones, the ones still standing. The split. We already covered this a bit last time, but quick recap because we're starting the clock here. In the year 330 AD, Emperor Constantine looks at old, tired, increasingly irrelevant Rome and goes, you know what? I'm just going to build a new capital. He picks a spot called Byzantium, sitting on a massive choke point between Europe and Asia, easier to defend, richer, and crucially, built as a proudly Christian city from the ground up. He renames it Constantinople, which is very modest of him, naming a city after himself. But hey, when you're the guy who legalizes Christianity across the empire, I suppose you've earned a little ego boost. From here, the empire slowly splits into two operating halves, Latin-speaking West, Greek-speaking East, until the divide becomes official and permanent in 395 AD, when an emperor split his territory between his two sons like some kind of divine timeshare agreement. Classic mistake. The two administrations immediately stop working together, and while the West spirals into the chaos we already covered, the East just keeps going. Paved roads, functioning bureaucracy, actual taxes being collected properly, a professional army. It's giving we have our life together energy while its sibling empire is out here getting sacked by every passing Germanic tribe with an axe to grind. Still alive counter, 0. Every time historians predict this empire is about to collapse and it doesn't, we're adding 1 to this counter. Let's see how many we rack up. Section 1. The Golden Age, fast forward to 527 AD, and we meet the empire's first real superstar, Emperor Justinian. Justinian has one goal, and it's a big one. Reconquer the entire Western Roman Empire. Get the band back together. He sends his general Belisarius, who is honestly criminally underrated in the history books, to retake North Africa, then Italy, then chunks of Spain. For a hot minute, it actually works. The Mediterranean is basically a Roman lake again. But Justinian isn't just fighting wars, he's building. He commissions the Hagia Sophia, a cathedral so massive and so architecturally insane for its time that when it was finished, Justinian reportedly walked in, looked up at the dome and said, "Solomon, I have surpassed thee," which is possibly the most confident thing anyone has ever said inside a building. He also does something way less glamorous but arguably more important. He codifies Roman law into one organized system, the Justinian Code, which becomes the backbone of legal systems across Europe for the next 1,000+ years. Genuinely, if you've ever benefited from a legal system that isn't just whatever the king felt like today, you can thank this guy. Still alive counter. 1. Because right as things are going great, in 541 AD, the plague of Justinian shows up and kills an estimated 25 to 50 million people across the Mediterranean world. Justinian himself catches it and survives somehow. But the reconquest stalls out, the economy takes a brutal hit, and everyone collectively agrees this empire is absolutely cooked. It isn't. Counter goes up. Section 2. The Slow Bleed. For the next few centuries, the empire settles into a pattern. Lose some territory, win it back, lose different territory, develop an entirely new administrative system to cope, repeat. In the 7th century, a brand new problem shows up from the south. The newly formed Islamic caliphates, riding the exact same wave of expansion we covered in the Reconquista video, and they take huge chunks of Byzantine territory almost immediately. Egypt, Syria, the whole southern Mediterranean coast, gone within a couple decades. At this point, any other empire would be done. The empire's response is to just reorganize everything. They restructure the entire territory into military provinces called themes, where local farmer soldiers defend their own land instead of relying on a distant professional army, which turns out to be a genuinely brilliant fix. The empire shrinks, but it stabilizes. Its giving got laid off, immediately pivoted careers, somehow thriving energy. Still a live counter. 2. Then, in 1054, something happens that has nothing to do with armies or invasions and everything to do with paperwork, which, if you remember from the Rome video, is basically this civilization's entire personality. The Christian church splits in half. The Pope in Rome and the Patriarch in Constantinople get into a theological argument so intense that they excommunicate each other, permanently, over things like whether bread should have yeast in it. This is called the Great Schism, and it's the moment Catholic and Orthodox Christianity officially become two separate things. And it matters a lot later, because it means when the Byzantines desperately need Western Christian help, that relationship is already broken. Section 3. The Betrayal. By 1204, the empire has weathered plague, invasion, civil wars, and a religious divorce, and it's still standing, though noticeably smaller and shakier than its glory days. And then something happens that is, genuinely, one of the most brutal betrayals in medieval history. The Fourth Crusade sets out from Western Europe with the official goal of retaking Jerusalem from Muslim control. Somewhere along the way, through a truly baffling chain of debts, political manipulation, and a deposed Byzantine prince promising the Crusaders a massive payday if they helped him take the throne, the entire crusade gets redirected. Instead of Jerusalem, the Crusaders sail straight to Constantinople, their fellow Christians' capital, and they sack it. Thoroughly. Priceless relics, ancient manuscripts, centuries of accumulated wealth and art, either destroyed or shipped back to Western Europe as loot. The famous bronze horses now sitting in Venice? Yeah, that's where those came from. This is the pattern interrupt moment, because everything up to this point has been comedic chaos. But this one actually hurts. This wasn't an enemy attacking a rival civilization. This was supposedly allied Christians destroying the heart of Christian civilization in the East because a payday looked too good to pass up. The empire technically survives, but it's fractured into several smaller successor states for decades before finally being reclaimed in 1261. But it never really recovers. The wealth is gone. The population is gone. What's left is essentially a shadow of what it used to be, still holding the title, still holding Constantinople, but running on fumes. Still a live counter. 3. Because somehow, impossibly, it's still not over. Section 4. The final siege. For the next 2 centuries, the empire basically becomes Constantinople and not much else. A once massive territory shrinks down to essentially one heavily fortified city and a scattering of disconnected holdings kept alive through diplomacy, marriage alliances, and increasingly desperate pleas to the West for help that mostly never comes. Because remember, that relationship never fully healed after 1204. Meanwhile, a new power has been rising fast. The Ottoman Turks, who have spent the last century steadily swallowing up Byzantine territory piece by piece until literally all that's left is the city itself, sitting there behind its legendary walls, walls that had successfully repelled every siege for over 1,000 years. In 1453, the young Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II, 21 years old, shows up with an army of over 80,000 men, and, more importantly, massive custom-built cannons specifically designed to finally break those walls. The defenders inside number somewhere around 7,000. The last Byzantine emperor, Constantine XI, carrying the exact same first name as the empire's founder, in a detail that historians love pointing out, refuses every offer to surrender and flee. The siege lasts 53 days. On May 29th, 1453, the walls finally break. Constantine XI, according to legend, tears off his imperial regalia so he won't be recognized and captured, and charges into the fighting alongside his soldiers rather than run. His body is never definitively identified afterward. Constantinople falls, the last true Roman Empire in any form, after 2,229 years, if you count all the way back to the founding of the city of Rome itself, is finally, actually, for real this time, over. Still a live counter. Final. Closing. So here's the thing that gets me about this story. We spent the Rome video watching an empire collapse in what felt like one long, chaotic slide. But the Byzantines didn't do that. They got knocked down by plague, by invasion, by their own supposed allies literally looting their capital, and every single time for over 1,000 years, they got back up. The empire that fell in 476 was really just one half of a much longer story, and the other half kept fighting long after everyone assumed it was already dead. Mehmed II renamed the city Istanbul, converted the Hagia Sophia into a mosque, which still stands today. And just like that, the last piece of the ancient Roman world was gone. If you want to know what happened to that famous cathedral after 1453, or what happened to the last surviving members of the Byzantine royal family, let me know in the comments because that's honestly a whole other video. Subscribe, become a member, and remember, next time someone tells you an empire is about to collapse any day now, maybe give it 1,000 years before you believe them.